Your neighborhood just got cooler with Kroger Delivery's refrigerated trucks. Simply order groceries at the same great prices online as in-store, and we'll bring them to you fresh every time. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can now earn 4 times the fuel points after 4 with your digital coupon. Choose a next-day Kroger Delivery time slot for 4 p.m. or later on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Must deliver by February 4th. Restrictions apply. See Kroger.com for details.
Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. In this week's episodes, we're going to break down who has the best tools among Orioles prospects. We're going to start with part 1 of this episode and discuss the hitters before shifting over to the pitchers in our second episode later this week. That's all coming up on Orioles on the Verge, which is brought to you by BetOnline. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. We have hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today, make game the day action count a little bit more. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, we do have a little bit of exciting news here at Orioles on the Verge. We've been hearing a lot of feedback from our listeners that they want merch. We haven't had a steady supply of merch in a while. The good news that Bob is about to deliver is that we might have found something.
Yeah, I just got the sample. I had to buy a couple first, just to make sure the quality was good, that the printing turned out all right, and it did. I got a long sleeve and a short sleeve shirt. Happy the way they turned out. I'll be wearing them as often as possible, and you can too by following the link that we will provide on social media, and I'll put it on the show notes for this podcast as well.
We're going to roll out even more merch, but for now you can find shirts with our new logo and a couple of vintage shirts. Shirts with older variations of our logo, which we recently redid. Now let's dive into tonight's topic, which is the best tools among Orioles prospects. As you've probably heard us discuss here in the last few weeks, we are pretty much in prospect list season right now. We're rolling out our top 50 to members of our Patreon community, and we're going to have the whole top 50 up here on the show in a few weeks. But we wanted to take some time to highlight the individual traits that some players have that really jump out at us. And for this episode, we're going to talk about the hitters. We're going to talk about who has the best power, the best hit tool, the best speed, best glove, and the best arm on defense. And let's start with best power. I think we have 2 really strong contenders for this category. I'll go to Nick to see which one he picked.
I'd imagine all 3 of us have the same answer for this one. I've got Kobe Mayo by a pretty healthy margin right now. 90th percentile exit velo is 106 against righties, almost 107 against righties, and almost 110 against the lefties. That was AAA last year, but 107 overall, 90th percentile, topped out at 115. And to put that into just context here, that would have ranked 115 peak exit velo would have ranked top 30, in Major League Baseball last season. So just ahead of guys like Marcell Ozuna, Austin Riley, Rafael Devers, big boppers we all know. Some we love, some we hate. Higher than any Orioles hitter last year. I think Santander was like 114. So Kobe Mayo got him by a mile per hour. I think it's Mayo and Basayo are in that top tier, but I think Mayo is pretty comfortably ahead of Basayo. But Basayo's not even an adult yet. He's not even 21. So we'll see what his numbers look like in AAA this year, but it's Mayo for right now.
Yeah, I also went with Mayo just because I think he's more matured. He's starting to get into that grown man strength, even though he's still very young. Nick read off the exit velocities, and I think he was interviewed somewhat recently and asked about the new dimensions in left field and seemed to be salivating over that, which, yeah, I get it. He could have cleared Baltimore or whatever you want to call it. But hey, if you don't have to hit it quite as far, just means more home runs are going to go out. Yeah, he's just got that humongous power from the right-hand side. Basayo, obviously, I think was the second choice. But like Nick said, he still has time to grow into more power and be able to tap into it in games more often. I think Mayo can already do that. Thomas Sosa, he might be coming for this crown a year from now, but for now, it's a dollop of Mayo, as Bobby Jones said in the Discord.
Yeah, I go with Mayo in this spot as well. I think Basayo has closed the gap a little bit in the last year, but I still go with Mayo for all of the data that Nick rattled off. And what just jumps out at me is that he has that BP power in game. You look at some of the home runs he's hit in the last 2 years at Norfolk. A couple that stand out in memory for me. One he hit out of the ballpark at Jacksonville. Another one that I think either went over or hit off the video board in Worcester. He's hit some real shots in Norfolk in the last few years. And I'm fully confident that even if it takes a little bit of time for him to adjust to major league pitching, when he gets back to Baltimore, the power is going to show up in his first full season.
Yeah, you look at down further even. I mean, there are some other guys coming up too that have some pretty impressive power. Like Bob mentioned Thomas Sosa there. He's got 107, 108, 90th percentile exit velos, multiple hits over 110 miles per hour last season. And because he is, let's say, very confident in his abilities in everything he does. I don't know if either of you guys saw this. I think it was yesterday. He posted a video on social media. Someone put together for a nice little preseason hype video. His player page, he's listed at 160, but in the beginning of the video, he steps on a scale and he's 220 of he is growing into his grown man body. I'm 10 pounds lighter, 10, 15 pounds lighter than him. And don't look like Thomas Sosa at all. I'll say that. I think Thomas Sosa, the game power wasn't there for him this year. As we've talked about all the time, whenever we talked about Sosa, he was very raw last year. But I think we see a power surge out of him this year. Judd Fabian, I think, is up there in that next tier. Creed Willems, I think, is in that next tier. Steven Martinez, he's already tapping into his game power.
Jordan Sanchez.
Yeah, it's the raw power. There's some big time guys. And I think some of them, Judd Fabian's already tapped into it, but I'm curious to see these guys who have that 60, 70 grade raw power who starts turning that into game power. Vance Honeycutt, didn't even mention him. I think some have him. I've seen anywhere between 50 and 70 on a lot of national outlets, but he's in there as well. There's some big boppers coming up through the system.
Absolutely. Yeah, Fabian, if he can make contact, the ball goes far and he hits it hard. It's just a matter of making contact, but that's not what we're talking about with this category. So yeah, I like it. A lot of home run hitters, a lot of guys that impact the ball. That's what the Orioles look out for, and I think they found some guys that are able to do that.
We'll go now to best overall hit tool, and there are a few players that could claim this mantle, and guys with completely different kinds of profiles. Someone like Enrique Bradfield Jr. would have a case here because he rarely swings and misses. Samuel Basayo has really developed into a refined all-around hitter. He might end up taking this one, but there's a few others in the mix. So, Bob, I'll start with you. Who do you have for best hit tool in the system?
I do have Samuel Basayo as having the best hit tool, which is kind of crazy when you consider that he's probably going to end up with as much, if not more power than Mayo when all is said and done. The last category we talked about, but it was John Mioli's article in the Baltimore Banner that really pushed me over the edge of okay, yeah, it's more than just, he's got power and he can run into the ball. No, he's almost, he's too good at making contact that he needs to learn to lay off the pitches that he can't do as much damage with, which we know swing decisions, that's what the Orioles preach, and they'll refine that. So for me, it was Basayo. It was Griffin Farrell was on the tip of my tongue here. Bradfield was an option as well, but I had to give it to Basayo since he's a beast. He's so good in so many categories, and I gave it to Mayo for the power. I wanted to give Basayo the contact.
I like it when you include power in there. Yeah, I think Basayo, pitch recognition, all of that. It's certainly one of his many impressive tools. I gave Basayo a different winner in this category. later on in the rundown as well. So for hit tool, spread the wealth a little bit. Genuinely, these guys all deserve this, I think. I gave the slight edge to Enrique Bradfield just because we've seen him do it in full season ball already in the pro ranks. So that's why it's a little bit easier, I think, for me to rank him at the very top. Just when you look at like swinging strike rate, overall strikeout rate, he's one of the best in the organization. Contact rate's good. Chase rates are very good. Like we saw what he did last year. We saw the improvements that he made. We saw the growth that he made. But yeah, I have Griff O'Farrell a very, very close second. And I honestly think by the end of the year, I'm warming up to O'Farrell. I still think the Joey Ortiz comps are a little much, but I am warming up heavily to Griff O'Farrell. And I think by the end of the year, depending on who they draft, of course, a lot of draft picks coming in, I think Griff O'Farrell could be up here at the top as having the best hit tool in this system. Just because if you go back to his last year's college numbers, he had a 7.5% strikeout rate in the ACC. And I think when you look at swinging strike rate, overall strike rate, the walk rate was going up in pro ball this year, but I think he's going to be right there with Enrique Bradfield in some of those categories. And if you include power in this, Bradfield's power numbers decreased as he went through his time at Vanderbilt. Griff O'Farrell had a career high 5 home runs last year at UVA, and I think a lot of those were bunched at the beginning of the year, but he showed more power last year than he ever has. So it's still like below average power, but can he maybe I have a bigger belief in Griff O'Farrell tapping into a smidge of power than I do for Bradfield, who is just lean into your strengths at this point. Don't worry about the power. So I think Griff O'Farrell is going to run into a few more home runs each year. So I think by the end of the year, Griff O'Farrell probably takes this honor.
Jordan Westbrook 2.0.
I considered O'Farrell. I considered Bradfield. I think that if you want to look at someone who could really take a big step forward in this area this season, keep your eye on Aaron Estrada. But I went with Samuel Basallo for this. I just think that what Basallo does in his ability to make contact with that kind of power is impressive. And here's what jumps out at me the most about Basallo. Last year at Bowie, 16 home runs in 106 games. Strikeout rate of under 20%, 19.1% strikeout rate to go to 9.2% walk rate. And if you look at his minor league career so far, he's been able to pretty consistently sustain strikeout rates that are 20% or lower, aside from his late season cameo at Norfolk last year. If he continues to do that as he moves up, there's some real Yordan Alvarez kind of traits here that you just don't see very often in players. And I really just feel like what Basallo has to offer, the ability to make contact, to hit the ball as hard as he does, and to not strike out that often is pretty significant.
Yeah, completely agree. If I could also shout out Ryan Stafford, I think is a guy that has a really, really good hit tool. Ellis Cuevas, Frederick Bencosme, Aaron Estrada. These are guys I think that can, the batting averages might not match up, but like a guy like Frederick Bencosme, he can basically hit the ball at will. It's just a matter of can he hit it hard enough to get a hit out of it. But yeah, for me, it's like we talked about, it's Basallo just because he's going to put the bat on the ball and more often than not, it's going for extra bases.
It's wild that Basallo, as a 16-year-old, and when I was doing, our top 50 prospect update episodes over on Patreon, and I'm doing Steven Martinez, and I kind of did the comparison there between Steven Martinez's numbers as a 16-year-old in the DSL and Samuel Basallo's numbers as a 16-year-old in the DSL. And you see this basically 21% strikeout rate for Basallo in the DSL. Last year in AA, and it's 450 plate appearances, he struck out 19% of the time. So nearly 2% lower strike rate in AA than he did in the DSL. He did that as a 19-year-old kid. Is he striking out 22% of the time in AAA this year? Maybe. So what is he? He's a sub 25% easily when he gets to the big leagues. He's striking out less than 25% of the time. He's probably going to walk 8-9% of the time, 10% on a really good year. It's just the all around bat, man. It's going to be so special, and I can't wait. I hope I don't think he comes up by the end of the year. Well, I think he comes up at the very end of the year, but I hope by halfway through the year he's forcing the Orioles' hand here.
Yeah, I mean, when he's a seasoned grizzled veteran at like 23, and he's putting up 10% plus walk rates and 15 to 16% strikeout rates and control in the zone. We might have the next Juan Soto, Jordan Alvarez combo.
We'll go over now to best speed, and I think that there's one prospect that comes to mind when we talk about speed. I should point out that there are some strong contenders other than Enrique Bradfield Jr., but I kind of have a feeling it's going to be a clean sweep here. Nick, am I right?
I mean, Enrique Bradfield is the only prospect in all of baseball to have 280 grades, according to Baseball America, and one of those is speed, and 80 is as high as you get. So, yeah, I think it's Bradfield, but I like Austin Overn's entering the organization. We haven't seen it across a full season, but he's entering as 70 grade speed. And when you look at speed and just not the ability to steal bases, or not just like how quick you are on the base path, but your ability to steal bags as well. Like Tavian Josenberger and Douglas Hodo were really, really good at stealing bases last year. Douglas Hodo was 51 and 58 in stolen base attempts last year, and Josenberger was 50 for 56 in stolen base attempts last year. So I think if you got Bradfield at 80 speed, Overn at 70 speed, Josenberger and Hodo probably just a tick below that. Yeah. Although I do wonder, I would like to see a race. He's not a prospect at all. I don't even know if he's still in the organization, to be honest.
Luis Valdez.
Yeah. I want Bradfield and Valdez to have a race and see who's fastest there. But
yeah, I was just about to bring up Luis Valdez. I think he's still in the organization, but yeah, he's the only guy I could see competing in a foot race. Obviously, named some other fast guys. Honeycutt, I don't know if he's quite there, but another quick guy. Not sure who the big from the international prospects coming up, like who's got that real stolen base speed. Maybe I don't know. Let's go with Emilio Sanchez. I keep getting Emilio Sanchez and Amelia Perez mixed up, the Oscar contending film, because they're so similar. But yeah, speed, easy choice. It's Bradfield. He's going to steal 100 plus bases a year, basically, in the major leagues once he gets here. And yeah, Nick, in his excellent 25 predictions for 25, said 80 plus steals in 2025 season for Bradfield. And I think that's pretty safe bet.
Yeah, he's got Roberto Mercado as his manager for probably at least half the season, and he's got 80 grade speed. He's definitely going to be stealing 80 bases this year. It's there's a lot of players, you guys mentioned them, Josenberger, Overn, Honeycutt, Valdez, who have a case here, but I feel like Bradfield, not just the speed, but the instincts that he shows on the bases, knowing when to run, being able to get the jumps that he has, is going to help him out a lot. And that's why I still feel like when you look at Bradfield's profile, yes, there are questions about whether or not he's going to hit the ball hard enough as he moves up the ranks. But everything else in that skill set, the speed and the defense, are going to play.
Maybe Colin Burns could be up there too.
You're never going to leave that one go. I want to throw another name out there too, that he's right there with the power. He's may or may not win any of our votes here for glove, but I'm sure he's going to be up there as well. Judd Fabian. Again, I mean, Judd Fabian's got 60 plus grade speed. Dylan Beavers is quick on the base paths as well. Like, you're drafting athletes, and it seems like the last two drafts, I know we've had comments on, I love the draft. I love getting all the information out there, the videos, the stats, anything I can find there right after the draft. And I swear the number of people who commented last year, like, let me guess, one of the fastest players in this draft class. Like, yep, you got it. That's a pretty common thing. Like the last 2 years, every other hitter the Orioles seem to draft, it's like, yeah, he's one of the fastest players in this draft class. They're gearing up for this new style of baseball. And I think you're seeing some guys who are going to settle in pretty well up there.
Reed Trimble, pre-injuries, was one of those types of players. I don't know about it anymore.
I don't know if you guys were aware of this. I became aware of it when I did Trimble's Patreon episode. It's part of our countdown. He has yet to be caught stealing in his professional career. A lot of injuries along the way, so he's never even played a full season, but still pretty impressive.
I did notice that, and yeah, that is very impressive. I hope he can go his whole minor league career and major league career with that record intact.
Let's go in now to what I think is going to be a pretty competitive category, and that is best glove. And this goes hand in hand with what Nick was just talking about a minute ago with prioritizing speed in the draft. And as part of that, the Orioles really have put a premium on defense, whether it's been some of their picks in center field like Bradfield, Fabian, or Vance Honeycutt. You can even look at Griffo Farrell's glove work at shortstop and make a case for him in this category. So there's a lot of players to consider, not to mention a few catchers that might have a claim here. But I think we know that there's probably distinct tiers with this group. And Nick, I'm curious to see who you have at the top.
For best fielder, Enrique Bradfield Jr. does have 80 grade fielding as well. You look at Baseball America, but you got to include the arm. And I know we're going to talk about the arm specifically next, but I include that as well. And Bradfield does not have the strongest arm in the system. So I think I'm looking at either Vance Honeycutt or Judd Fabian for best fielder. Like, Fabian is electric in the outfield. I know we've mentioned this a couple of times before, especially throughout last season. I just don't think, and maybe it's because of the swing and miss with the bat, I don't think Fabian gets enough credit for the speed, for the defense, and everything else that he does on the field. When you have that glaring hole of the hit tool, it's understandable. But yeah, I'm saying Fabian or Honeycutt. I mean, again, Honeycutt was in the conversation to be the number one overall pick this time last year. And his defense, it was a big reason why down there at UNC. So as far as like outfielders go, I don't think we have the, elite infielder. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with that. Griffo Farrell probably coming up. He's got a really, really good glove, but I don't know if we have that elite, like, this is a bona fide future Gold Glove, infielder. Griffo Farrell is probably the closest to that. A lot of these stronger defenders are the outfielders. And a lot of them are now in AA and AAA, pushing for the major leagues right now.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. And I think that's probably okay right now, just because we have Gunnar, Westberg, Holiday, et cetera, et cetera. So not quite as necessary. Yeah, of course. How could I forget? But yeah, I had to go outfield as well. I was going to say Bradfield, but I wanted to spread the love as much as possible, and I put him for fastest player. So I went with Honeycutt as my top defender, but could have easily been Fabian. Could have easily been a guy like Austin O'Verne. Again, speed kills out there. It could have been, and I want to say this just to piss off Mark in a Discord, Patreon, Dylan Beavers. No, it couldn't have been Dylan Beavers. I don't know if he's as bad as maybe some people think, but Griffo Farrell for the infield. If you want to say Silas Ardoin or Ardway as for the catcher, Maverick Hanley, Douglas Hodo. Like, yeah, there's plenty of options, but it was really, for me, it was between Fabian, Bradfield, and Honeycutt, and I went with Honeycutt just to spread the love around, not make the obvious pick.
I was really torn between Fabian, Bradfield, and Honeycutt, and in the end, I went for Bradfield. Just everything with him in center field. I know the arm. I think Nick is right that if you're going to look at the arm and factor that in, Honeycutt and Fabian would have an edge, but I kind of separated the arm out of the equation for me and just looked at what they can do in the position. And all three of them are going to stick in center field as they move up. There's no question. But what Bradfield can do with his speed, his ability to run the ball down the gaps, to me is significant. You look at Cedric Mullins at his best, and I would argue that Bradfield is going to be a tick or two better than that. I just think that his speed is better than Mullins was at its best, and that the range is just very, very good. And again, going back to what I talked about earlier with his instincts on the bases, he has those same instincts in center field. He's not going to get cheated on a ball. So I went with Bradfield here, but it's a close call.
All right. Go back to this whole thing about fielding and the infield. And it really wasn't until this afternoon when I was really looking at this. Like, there really isn't. Is Freddie Bencosme the best defensive infielder prospect-wise in the organization right now?
He might be. I mean, Leandro Arias pretty solid. Like, there's a bunch of guys that aren't going to hurt you, but like, is there a guy that's like, oh, we need that glove out in the field to save some runs? I don't know. You might be right there. I mean, maybe some of the the younger guys like Elvin Garcia, he might be decent. We haven't really got a chance to see too much Jose Pena, but yeah, I think you might be right. It's like Griffith Farrell, Frederick Bencosme, and outfielders.
Yeah, there was not. I mean, O'Farrell was the only infielder I really considered here. From the video we had from the DSL last year, I really like Emilio Sanchez at shortstop. I think that for his age, he shows a pretty advanced feel for the position, but it's still short of being in this conversation for me. So when Sanchez is in Delmarva, which will probably be 2026, we'll get a good look at him there. And I think that by that point, he will be in the conversation. But what I'm wondering as we're talking about this, do you think that the reason that there's not a standout infielder defensively, which is a real departure from a few years ago when Joey Ortiz was always in this conversation, is because the Orioles like to move their infielders around so much? I mean, Frederick Bencosme played primarily, well, mostly second base up until last year. Then they started to play him at shortstop more. Aaron Estrada moves around a lot. There's just a lot of guys that can play multiple positions, and I don't know that the Orioles have quite zeroed in on, okay, we're going to draft the best defensive shortstop, the best defensive third baseman we can find. Instead, it's been moving players around, and then if they happen to look really good and stick at one position the way that Jackson Holliday looks like he's going to be able to play second base at the major league level, that's great, but otherwise they want them to be versatile.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Jackson Holliday locked down for hopefully a couple of years here when the breakout happens in 2025. You've got Gunnar Henderson locked down for a couple more years. I know people are already counting down the days until he's no longer an Oriole, but he's going to be around for a few more years. You've got Jordan Westbrook on this infield. So, yeah, I guess this is the opportunity these past couple of drafts to really just stock that outfield. Go after some high-profile bats and maybe not worry about the gloves as much. But I feel like maybe that's why the Griffith Farrell pick. I feel like that was a good explanation by John Mioli last time he was on. What he kind of said, hey, you need one of these guys who he may not excel at everything, but like he's going to get the job done just as you want it done. Defensively, offensively, he's a grinder. He's going to be there to help kind of stabilize these things. Take over after Anthony Servideo and Carter Young are no longer in the organization probably. Yeah, it's just an interesting note. I'm not concerned at all about that either when this infield is so good and so young. Haven't even talked about Kobe Mayo and where is he going to play, but he's in there as well. So, yeah, I'm not concerned at all. It's just something interesting going through the system.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And everything the Orioles do, there's a reason they're doing it the way they do it, even if we don't know why. So, yeah, I think maybe they just think that outfield defense is a better priority for the time being, especially because we have the guys in place. But also, I don't know, maybe they figure on the infield it's better to just be adequate and have a good bat versus in the outfield the defense is more important. Who knows? But I'm sure the team does.
Let's wrap up the position player side of this conversation with best arm. Now, we've kind of touched on the players that you would expect to be up for consideration in this category already with their conversation, not just about best glove, but a little bit in best speed. It came up there too. So this category, I think you've got a lot of players who are in the mix that could be chosen, but I know that there's probably one or two in particular that stand out. So Bob, I'll let you start. Who do you have for best arm in the system?
This is where I put Judd Fabian, and that's the difference between him and Bradfield. Bradfield definitely faster. I mean, they can both go chase balls down and get them, but Fabian, he's got a strong arm. It's accurate from center field. Like he might not have the pure strongest arm as far as like velocity from the outfield, but I think when you combine the accuracy, it's the guy that if there's a fly ball with the runner on third, you got to cut him down at home to win the game. Fabian's my guy to get the job done right now in this moment. Plenty of other contenders, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but yeah, Fabian was my pick.
I remember a game last year in AA where it was, I think, game on the line, winning run at third base, and he gunned him down at home plate. It was an amazing play. I also think too, some of that is like Bradfield just has such elite speed where I can't tell you, I can't give a grade here on like his jumps and how well he reads the ball. most of his games came last year in Aberdeen, where half the outfield is like you can't see it on their cameras. So can't really say that. But Fabian, I just feel like he reads the ball so well off the bat that whatever he lacks in speed, and he's not lacking in speed at all, but like comparing to Bradfield, he makes up for it and getting good jumps on the ball. But for my best arm, I went with Samuel Basayo. I don't have updated numbers from last year, but I was looking through some other things that I had written down here, and this was a note from, I think, this time last year. So Basayo was pushing sub 2.0 pop times, and the note says, so I don't know which article this is directly from, sorry, but the note I copy and pasted here onto my notes just said Basayo's arm strength, this was a quote from a scout, Basayo's arm strength matches or exceeds Adley's already. So yeah, I think I've seen some outlets have it as like a 70 grade arm there behind the plate. I'd be interested to know just how hard he throws from behind the plate now, a year later, what that number looks like.
As would I.
I considered Basayo here. I thought about Kobe Mayo, but I don't, I know that the conversation now has kind of shifted towards him playing first base. So this really came down for me between Fabian and Honeycutt, and I give Fabian a slight edge because, one, we've seen the arm in pro ball. We know how good it is. And I agree with both of you. The strength does not necessarily jump out at you, which is why I think some outlets have graded Fabian in a 55 arm. But I go more along Fangraph's line of thinking that it's a 60 grade arm because it is so accurate. And it seems like he can really throw the ball from just about any spot in the outfield. And it's just something that really jumps out at me with him. It is possible that Honeycutt does have the better arm. So 6 months from now, I might have a different answer to this question, but I give Fabian the slight edge for now.
I like it. Yeah, I almost went like a Thomas Sosa or Steven Martinez just because I think these guys, they have strong arms for right fielders, and I feel like in a couple of years they could be like real weapons out there, but couldn't justify it at the end of the day over a guy like Fabian.
One other guy, some of the younger guys we just have no data on, and most of them we have no film on. But one guy I'm going to be watching, I would love more information about, is DJ Layton. Because if a lot of reports seem to think that he can stick at shortstop, and I know when he was in high school, he was also a pitcher, throwing 95, 96 miles per hour, I think. That could be another guy. Maybe that's one of your guys talking about infielders and arms and defense. DJ Layton could be a nice surprise coming up through the system. Maybe some of these high school kids, Andrew Tess, the catcher, I know he was lauded for his defensive abilities. So maybe they're going younger with those skill set on the infield, and we'll see what they do this year in their first years.
That does it for this look at the best tools among the position players in the Orioles farm system. We'll be back later on this week to break down the best tools among the pitchers in the farm system. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 level to have access to our full Top 50 Prospects Countdown and more content that we will have in store for our patrons during the regular season. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network.